Gittin Daf Zayin Amud Bet. The meaning of a logo or branding and logos. ודלמא סימנא שוויאn. The shiur is sponsored this morning by Joey Freudman. Thank you, Joey. Joey's been a member of the Matmonim community from the very beginning, here every single morning with us. He's sponsoring in memory of his brother, Guy Freudman, Mike Michael Mordechai, who passed away only 2 months ago. Mike Freudman was a person, a very fascinating person. Even his family only discovered a whole lot of things about him after he died. He was a person who never allowed the physical challenges, the challenges of life, to hold back his joy of life, his accomplishments, both professionally and in sports. An amazing human being who had a long career with the Mossad, so much so that on his tombstone, very, very unusually and rarely, is the logo of the Mossad. They honored him to such a degree. And it's very appropriate, Joey, because the shiur is about logos. So it's, maybe when you sent me that picture of his tombstone, that set my mind thinking. And I wonder how many people in the world are going to be learning Daf Zayin with Aleph and Beis today in Gittin, and how many of the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who are going to be learning it will realize that they've learnt the principles of branding and logos. I know the few hundred people who are learning Matmonim will know that that's one of the just uncountable numbers of nuggets of chokhmas hachayim, of just life insight that there is in every line of Gemara. But try it out. Ask people to learn the Daf Yomi. What did you think about the branding and logo piece in the Gemara today? And they'll look at you blankly and say, what planet do you come from? Because people learn the Gemara superficially, and in the Gemara is everything we need to know about life. Is in the Gemara. Everything we need to know about life, about leadership, about business and professions, about family, about spiritual development, about character growth and development. Everything we need to know is in the Gemara. But we're not going to find it if we run through the Gemara superficially. Now, we've been talking about handwriting, we were talking about signatures, and there are two types of signatures. So there's a signature which is, a person just signs his name, and there's a signature that a person designs as his logo. It's designed to convey a certain image. Those are two different types of signature. And in logos, there are different types of logos. What we're going to learn are two schools of thought in logo design. The one is the school of the Rashbam from the 12th century, the 11th century, and the other is the school of the Marshal from the 16th century. So we're going to, once again, we're having a conversation that spans a period from the 4th century in the Gemara through the 16th century in Krakow until today, about schools of thought of what a logo is and what branding is. And it's interesting that we're talking about handwriting and we're talking about signatures. Is a signature just me writing my name in my own handwriting? Is that what makes it valid in a get and in other shtarot? Or is a signature actually a designed logo intended to convey a certain image? And my relationship to handwriting and graphology started many, many years ago in the 1960s, in the late 1960s, in fact, when I was thinking, I was in yeshiva, and I remember thinking to myself, the Chovat Halavavot in Shar HaKniyah, in the beginning of Shar HaKniyah, which deals with humility, says, if you're humble, if humility to you means, I'm not worth anything. Who am I? I'm a nobody. That's not humility, that's just self-denial. That's just not knowing yourself. Humility is to know how great you are. Like a Moshe Rabbeinu, who was Anav Mod Mikol Adam, he knew how great he was. What do you think? He didn't know he was the greatest Novi of all times? It's about knowing how great you are as a Ben Yisrael, as a Jewish person, as a human being, and as an individual, and still being humble. That's humility. And I went to see Reb Chaim Lifshitz, who I became a very, very close friend of, and he became a Rebbe and a major influencer in my thinking. He was a mashgiach in Kerem B'Yavneh at the time, and I said to him, Reb Chaim, to figure out one's weaknesses is easy, but how do you figure out your strengths? How do you know what makes you great? He said, no, to figure out your greatness is easy. How do you know what your weaknesses are? I said, what do you mean it's easy? How do you know your greatness? He said, graphology, handwriting. So I burst out laughing. So he said, show me your handwriting and I'll tell you. So I gave him my handwriting. It was what a mind-blowing experience, which started a relationship that continued until his death just over 10 years ago. And one of the things he asked me was to give him a signature. And then it was his turn to laugh. He looked at my signature and he burst out laughing. He said, this is your signature? This is the signature. This is just a scribble. This is not, where's a signature? You don't have a signature, you don't have a logo. And so one has to, when analyzing signatures, he taught me graphology then for the next 20 or 30 years. And in analyzing signatures, a mistake that graphologists sometimes make is not understanding the first thing you've got to decide. Is this a signature just writing your name, as we said yesterday, in a spontaneous way that is not in any way governed by image? You're just writing it to get it done. That's just a scribble. Or is a signature a designed logo meant to convey an image? You need to know that before you get into it. Now, what does all this have to do with our Gemara? The Gemara is talking about a case where there are two Gittin written on one piece of paper, and under the one get, a person signs Yaakov. Under the other get, there's a signature Reuven. But the handwritings of the two signatures are the same. Do we assume this is Yaakov Reuven or Yaakov ben Reuven who signs for both Gittin? Or is there a Yaakov and there's a Reuven? And the Gemara says, well, maybe the Reuven is the father's name. No, says the Gemara, he wouldn't just use his father's name like that. It says the Gemara, ודלמא סימנא שוויאn. Perhaps his father's name is well known and he uses it as a logo. Maybe his father's name is Kennedy, or his father's name is Churchill. He would put it down because that's a logo. That's a well-known name. Dehor Rav, because there are examples of logos. Rav Tzier Kivra. Rav used to sign with the image of a fish. He probably had a ring with a signature with a seal on it, and the picture was a fish. Rav Chanina Charuta. Rav Charita used to have a palm tree. Rav Chisda just had a samach. Rav Oshaya just had an ayin. Rabbi Baravuna Tzier Makuto. Rabbi Baravuna had a sailboat. He had the sails of a ship. So maybe it's just, he's putting his father's name as a siman. Answers the Gemara, lo chatzif inish lishav yesh lishma davu simana. People don't use their father's name as a logo. That's not respectful to your father to use it as a marketing tool. You don't do that. We have a parallel sugya back on Daf Lamed Vav, and we have a parallel sugya in Bava Basra Daf Kuf Samach Aleph and Wud Aleph. In Lamed Vav, you might remember the Gemara talks about this very piece of Gemara and says Shani Rabbanan de Bekian Simanayu. But you can't say that since the Rabbanan had these logos that anybody can just sign with a logo. The Rabbanan's logo was a brand. Everybody knew it. Here we have the introduction of the idea of a brand. Just to make your own little picture of a fish or a what, that you can't sign like that. It's not distinguishing. But if the image you're using is your brand, that's different. Ask the Gemara, what brand? Where do you know that this is a brand? What was on billboards? Where did you see it? On letterheads, where did you see their brand? Meikor b'mayav kihinu b'diski, on their shilas and shuvas. They used to send responsa all over the world, and it was signed that way with a fish or with a sailboat. So everybody knew this was the brand of this particular Godel B'Torah. This was his brand, and that's a completely different thing. The Rashbam says in Bava Basra, remember in Bava Basra, most of Bava Basra is the Rashbam, not Rashi. Rashbams, we don't have Rashi, we have Rashi's grandson, the Rashbam, or we have Rashi in parts, but we've also got the Rashbam. And he says there, it's kamot surat chotam shebetabato. It's like a person has a signet ring and there's a logo on the signet ring, so they used to sign with a picture with a logo. And then the Rashbam says, umo'il kechatimat shmo, and using your logo is like signing your name. Va'mefaresh ta'ama ma'itzier kivra v'charuto eno el hatoeh. And don't get bound up in trying to give meaning to logos. What does it mean, the date to the palm tree? What does the fish mean? What does the sailboat mean? Don't have to give meaning to logos. Logos are designs. They're aesthetics. They like that design. So the Rashbam has a philosophy of logos for us. It's about design. It's personal preference. Express your aesthetic in the logo you choose. It says something about what you appreciate from a design perspective. But when you're looking at design is not art. There's a difference between art and design. If you're looking at a Van Gogh or you're looking at a Rembrandt, you can kind of figure out what's he telling me? What's this picture saying to me? What's the inner meaning? But when you're looking at a logo, when you're looking at branding, don't get all involved in that. It's just aesthetics. It looks nice to the person who designed it. Whether you like it or you don't like it is not really relevant. The one maybe liked eating fish, and so he drew a fish. It just means something to him. And the other one likes dates, so it's just personal preference. That's all it is, says the Rashbam. No, says the Marshal. We jump to the 16th century. And I'm very grateful, by the way, one of the members of our Matmonim community is Rabbi Yaakov Naimark. Rabbi Yaakov Naimark is the Rebbe's shliach in the Ukraine. And he comes from a very important family. His grandfather was doing amazing work in the Soviet Union on behalf of the previous Rebbe, helping Jews and spreading Torah at great risk to his life. I think he was actually murdered eventually. He really risked his life. And the Rebbe at the time said that if he had more people like Rabbi Yaakov Naimark's grandfather, he could have overthrown the Soviet government, could have created a revolution in Russia, because he was such a dedicated worker for Soviet Jews. And his grandson, Rabbi Yaakov Naimark, is one of our colleagues, one of our participants in the Matmonim community. And he pointed out to me that I made an error a couple of days ago. I talked about the Levush studying with the Marshal and the Ramah in Kharkov. And that's an error, of course. The Marshal and the Ramah lived in Krakow, which in Hebrew is spelled similarly to Kharkov, in Poland, not in Kharkov. And I'm indebted to Rabbi Yaakov Naimark because Torah has to be emes, it has to be accurate, it has to be right. And even if it's just a passing comment, if it's included in Torah, it has to be emes, it has to be right. So I'll put a correction in the description of that shiur. Thank you, Rabbi Yaakov, for taking the trouble to point that out. So here we have the Marshal, the Levush's Rebbe, who gives us his view of branding and logos. Says the Marshal, V'li nireh, on the side of the Marshal's Gemara, Nichtav B'tzideh, on the side of the Marshal's Gemara, they found the following in Bava Basra. Ze dikdek v'nizhar b'dagim gedolim lichvod Shabbos. The one who used to sign with a fish used to eat fish every Shabbos because he regarded fish as a delicacy. And the fish represented his kovod Shabbos. Like the famous story in Shabbos Daf Yutes of Rabbi Yossi Moiker Shabbos, you remember? Every child knows the story where the fisherman finds a fish that swallowed the diamond and so on. So for him, fish was very important. In some places, fish is a bigger delicacy than meat. And that's, for him, that's what he did. So it was his logo because it expressed his appreciation of Shabbos. That's why he signed with it. It's not just because he liked fish. There was a reason. This is part of his soul. What he does with fish, when he sees fish, he thinks Shabbos. He doesn't see a fish and think, beautiful, interesting, go to the aquarium. When he sees a fish, he thinks, what would this taste like on Shabbos? And you've got somebody else who used to make a delicacy. Every Shabbos he would have dates on the table. So what's the difference between the Marshal and the Rashbam? The Rashbam says, don't get locked up in giving meaning to logos. Says the Marshal, absolutely get locked up in giving meaning to logos. What do you think these chachomim were just stam, a design? Yes, says the Marshal, design is stam. That's what design is. It is just a preference. No, says the Marshal, not when it comes to logos. When it comes to logos, a design expresses something in your soul. I'm sorry Grant isn't here today because this is his field of expertise. And a lot of branders today will say, be careful that your brand expresses your true soul. Don't just create a brand that expresses an image like you would want people to see you. Create a brand that actually expresses who you are at a soul level. Like the Marshal says, this is about my worldview. It's about the way I view Shabbos. It's about the way I view time. It's about the way I view occasion. What makes something important and how to make something important, how to make something valuable. That's what my seal is. That's what my logo is. And we need to appreciate that our logos are not just the logos that we have on our stationery. A logo is, and our branding is the way we dress. Our branding is the way we organize our home. Our branding is our writing, our handwriting. Our branding is the way we speak to people. Our branding is the way we send emails. All of this is about branding, the way people experience us at a superficial level. Says the Rashbam, yes, it's superficial and that's fine, that's all it has to be. Just make it nice, make it pleasant. People should see you, they shouldn't be put off. When you're eating in a public place, eat in a way that doesn't make everybody else feel disgusted. Just be nice, just have an aesthetic. Dress in a way that looks decent, that people look at it and doesn't put them off. No, says the Marshal, it goes much deeper than that. The way you project yourself to the outer world needs to be an expression of something that you value, of something that is core to who you are. That's what branding is, and that's what self-branding is. And therefore, ודלמא סימנא שוויאn, the discussion of the Gemara is, could a person use their family name as a brand name? And that it's not, I'm just not using my father's name just stam, but I'm doing it as a brand. And the Gemara says, Lo chatzif inish l'shivya l'shmad da'ava d'simona. A person wouldn't be so chutzpahdik to convert a family name into a brand. That cheapens the family's name. At the end of the day, a brand is a superficial thing. It's about packaging, it's about marketing. Your family name is about who you are in the essence. And even according to the Marshal, it says that even a brand is something deeper than a superficial sign. Nevertheless, to use your family name as a brand, that's something that the Gemara says people would not have the chutzpah to do. So there we have just such an interesting understanding of a piece of Gemara that one might read through quite quickly and not realize what the conversation is really about and how deep one can go into understanding Chazal's intention in this piece of Gemara.